Mike, so great to have you on the podcast. I think you are this only the second astronaut that I've had on the podcast, and I remember trying to get you on the podcast when was it Spaceman? Was that your first book that came out?
Mm-hmm. Yep, that
Yeah,
was
and,
the
and
first one.
I reached out then, and I wasn't able to get you. Unfortunately, your team reached out to me, and I'm like, yes, absolutely, I want to have Mike on the podcast.
Oh,
So
cool.
I've really been looking forward to having you and having this conversation.
Well, thanks for having me, Ryan. I appreciate it.
Tell me about the difference between the Spaceman and your newest book that you've come out, which is called
Mhm.
Moonshot, and why you decided to write another book about obviously your career, but also lessons in leadership and how we as civilians can implement some of the lessons that you've learned in space in our own lives.
Sure. And the first book you mentioned, Spaceman, was a memoir. So it was kind of details about me and what I had been through and how I got to the astronaut office and what I did in space. And so very biographical. This new book, Moonshot, is trying to share lessons learned to hopefully help people achieve their own moonshots. Over the years of my trying to get to NASA and then at NASA, there were lessons I learned that I think were important for success. And that's what this book is about a few decades worth of lessons learned presented in a way that hopefully will help others achieve their goals as well.
I think it will. I've got the book here, so I read it
Oh, cool. There you
myself.
go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I like these because this one, like I looked through it, and on the content section, it doesn't have
Mhm.
any page numbers on it because it's not quite finished yet. So
Yeah,
these
you
are
got the
always like
galley.
prized possess.
Yeah,
Yeah, exactly.
yeah,
They're always prized possessions in my collection of books.
yeah. The real book. Let me see if I have a copy here, but here near me. Now I'd have to go out in the hallway to get one, but it looks more or less the same, except it's got a hardcover. But it
Yeah.
doesn't look intimidating at all, which I was happy about. It's not very thick. It's a couple hundred pages, but it's not as big as the memoir was. So it doesn't seem very intimidating. I think I was glad to see that it didn't appear that way to me anyway.
And I think that's good. What's the phrase? Simplicity is the ultimate sophistication, right? If you can't explain it in a succinct way, then maybe you
Yeah,
don't know your information well enough.
yeah. There's a saying. I would have if I had more time, I would have written a shorter book.
Yeah,
So it's harder to
exactly.
get. It's hard to get to. So but no, I'm very happy with the way it came out.
I don't know though. I'm curious. I spent a little time in the military, and
Mhm.
that's the antithesis, I think, of what we're talking about now. It seems like everything is over explained, and every little detail is accounted for, and sometimes there's scenarios and situations that are addressed that are just seem completely irrelevant and unnecessary. Have you found that to be the case at NASA as well, or is it a well-oiled machine and you guys focus on the fundamentals and the rest? I mean, I hate to say figure it out along the way. I'm sure you don't do that, but I think you understand what I'm saying.
Yeah, I think I thought it was appropriate. It's free. The way we worked as a unit, as in the astronaut office and the mission control center, and our instructors and that group of people at the Johnson Space Center, especially, I thought were when they told you something, it's because you needed to know. It was so I felt like the details were important. I think you couldn't know everything, but I felt like the more you knew about something you were working on, the better you would be at it. And a lot of what we did was taking care of problems that sometimes we created ourselves or we encountered along the way, and you had to adjust
Mm-hmm.
and think about what to do. And I think problem solving comes with practice, and that's what we did in a lot of our training exercise. We were basically training all the time, and we were on the ground one way or the other to be prepared when we got to space. So I didn't feel like there was a lot of rules. I think like for the way we operated, it was fine. I thought like the government had a lot of rules in general, though, that
Yeah.
yeah, just the way they did everything, just the rules they had to what you had to do to set up travel and administrative stuff and all that bookkeeping. Yeah, that was a little much, but as far as the way compared to all that bureaucracy, I guess when it came down to the way we were going to operate, I thought it was pretty streamlined, and we stuck to what we needed to know and what we could control. So I think the government in general, a lot of times, has got a lot going on. It's a bit, it's big.
Yeah.
But I feel like within your own team, you can try to get right to business, and that's what we did.
Are there unconventional or at least little known characteristics that somebody like myself or listening would want to know about what it would take to be an astronaut? I mean, when you think about it, obviously the ability to lead, you talked about the ability to problem solve. Obviously, somebody who's physically, mentally, emotionally healthy, I imagine, is something that's very important. Somebody that can deal in difficult and challenging circumstances. But are there other characteristics that would make one astronaut or prospect more appealing to an organization like NASA over another?
I think that what I was looking for. Are you hearing me? Okay.
Yeah, I've got you just fine. Yeah, I've got you.
Okay. If I can double check here. Sorry.
Yeah, no, do what you need to do.
I think I gooned something. No, we're good. You're good. You're hearing me. You're hearing me clear.
Audio sounds good on my
Okay,
level, so I think you're fine.
All right. Anyway, okay, great. I once you get selected, which is not an easy thing to do because a lot of people want to do that job and there's only a few spots. You start helping evaluate applications and candidates after you're in the office, in the astronaut office for a little while, and that's kind of interesting because now what are you looking for? What do you want? And a lot of people are qualified. That's the first question. Can they do the job? Are they capable? Are they competent? And then the other part is, I think that kind of comes into it, which is a little harder to assess. Is there any sign of ego? It's going to be a problem for us. Ego, I think, is it can help you want to achieve things and do things and give you confidence. But is this person so much an individualist? Are they going to be a problem when it comes to the team concept that we work under? And then also, is this person passionate about the job? It was a job. I mean, just like you're saying in the military, sometimes people glamorize certain careers in their mind of what they think it's like in a movie or something. But the astronaut job it was a job. I mean, we got to fly in space, which was awesome. But even that was hard work. And there was a lot of late nights in training and a lot of missed holidays and birthdays and other celebrations and a lot of long hours and weekends. And it wasn't easy, and there's a bit of danger involved there. A lot of things we did, so it wasn't necessarily all fun all the time. And I think that I look for people that have that passion because I think it's the passion and the dedication to the space program that keeps you going when times are tough. But the team concept, the idea of finding someone who is willing to admit when they can't do something, because that was part of it too that I learned along the way. That was very helpful to me, was that the culture we had at NASA was that if you needed help with something, your job was to speak up. And that could be maybe you're hurt and can't perform, or something's going on at home, or you just don't understand the concept that we're trying to learn, or you're having trouble doing whatever it is. You need to speak up and get some help to rectify that, because if you don't, then you're going to hurt the team. And if you're good at something, your job is to help others. And the idea was if you're really good at something, but your teammate is really struggling with it, then you have something you need to fix, which is help your teammate. So it was this idea of working as a team and putting individual accomplishment kind of on the side. That's something that is, I think, hard to find. And I think the most important quality. I mean, you need to be competent to be able to do the job, but I think the teamwork aspects of it, those personality aspects, the way you work with others and the way you deal with the world, do you see it as it's all about me, or do I take care of the people around me? And that, I think, is the thing that we're looking for. I always look for more than other aspects.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I'm glad you talked about it as not always being glamorous either, because how many total days do you have in space personally?
Yeah, I only got 26.
And how long were you an astronaut? 18 years. So like 26 days, you're doing the job that everybody thinks is what astronauts do. 26 days out of 18. So I'd really appreciate you telling us that, because sometimes, even with me to a lesser degree, I'll get people who are like, oh, wouldn't it be cool to talk with guys like Mike and whoever else you're talking to? I'm like, it is cool, but I'm
Hmm.
also answering emails and
Hmm.
dealing with nonsense and,
Hmm.
worrying about the finances. And there's
Hmm.
other things that aren't as fun that you don't get to see on a daily basis.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. There's always those details that every job comes with, and it's a job. It's a really cool job, but it's a job. But it's interesting, Ryan. I really did like the non-flying part of it too. I mean, I didn't
Hmm.
the paperwork or whatever was a pain. We didn't have they tried to limit that for us, but the training and figuring out problems and being part of the team on the ground, either preparing and training to go to space or working underwater, training for our spacewalks, flying in our jets, T-38 jets that we flew in, and working to figure out problems with our engineers for how we were going to do our spacewalks, what tools we needed, how were we going to get the job done. I miss that. I miss that as much as being in space. Actually, when I dream, I used to dream when I first left the astronaut office, I dream about being in space. And now I
Hmm.
tend to dream more about the preparation we did and missing those aspects of the job too.
Is that right? That's
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah, I mean,
So,
I enjoyed, and that was the thing, you needed to enjoy those things where you weren't in space because, it took, first of all, it took a long time to be selected. It was about a 10-year process for me to finally get picked and after getting
wow.
rejected 3 times. And then, it was another 2 years of basic astronaut school. And then it was another 4 years after that till I got to fly. It was 2 years to be assigned. So it was 2 years of astronauts college, more or less, to be qualified after you're selected, and then another 2 years until I got assigned to a flight, and then it was another 2 years of being assigned until the actual rockets launch. So you've got to enjoy what you're doing along the way and enjoy the training and the other parts of the jobs other than flying in space.
Yeah. So what was your path? You're an engineer, correct?
Mhm.
You're and that's your background. Did you go through the military route, or were you a pilot beforehand? What does that route look like for you?
Yeah. No, I didn't go through the military route. I did have I was academic. I had some work experience. I had a degree in engineering. I had a PhD in engineering. And I had a private pilot's license. So I enjoyed that. But no, I was not a military person. An astronaut office is about half and half, 50-50 military, non-military.
Okay.
It used to be all military way back when they first started, but especially with the shuttle program in the late 70s, they started selecting more civilians. And
Mm.
so it's an interesting mix. I think, you need military people who can play nice with civilians who are kind of academic and pointy headed. And, you need scientists and engineers who can operate and work with the military culture. I think the military culture meaning that you take care of each other and you're very team oriented and you're on time and you do your job and that comes first. All those principles, I think that was our culture, speaking up when you made a mistake, not holding it against people when they admit their mistakes, but try to understand what happened and keep going. I think a lot of that came out of the military culture that we had in the office.
Did you ever find it challenging with your level of education to communicate effectively with somebody who didn't have the same level of formal education? I mean, because that can be a challenge at times too when you have an engineer, for example, talking
Mhm.
with somebody who doesn't have that level of education. It's like, okay, we're not even speaking the same language. How do you work through some of that?
Well, Ryan, I always felt like if you really understand something, you should be able to explain it to anyone.
Mm,
If it's like, oh, I can't explain it to you, it's too complicated. Well, maybe you don't know it well enough. I think
yeah.
you should be able to explain the basic idea of what you're doing to a young person with who's in elementary school or below, whatever, or someone who doesn't have education or someone who has different experiences. I never thought that was someone else's fault for not understanding what I was saying. I needed to
Mm.
communicate it better. And I think that I think it takes a lot of effort to do that. It's not easy. but I think if you really understand something, you should be able to communicate it. And so I think that I hopefully was able to do that. But I never felt like I was talking over people's heads. They couldn't understand what I was saying. It was my job. If I needed for someone to understand what was going on, it was my job to figure out a way to communicate that to them.
Well, and it's not like you're dealing with dumb people either. I mean, these
No, everyone, yeah,
individuals are the top of the
yeah.
top. You know, these are the best
Well, no,
people we have to offer. So
yeah, certainly the astronauts and the engineers, but I mean, just about it. You know, a lot of people might just have the same background. But most people in life want to do their jobs and want to do well. And yeah, I think if you communicate with them, if it's something that you're trying to explain in a situation, I guess I'm imagining, you know, a situation where we need something done and this person, we need their help. How do we explain to them what we need? I think that most people want to help. Most people want to do their job. Most people want to be part of the team that's successful. So I think it's our job. If you're able to, if you need something done or you're able to something, whatever it is, you know something about something and someone else doesn't, it's your job to figure out how to communicate it effectively. That's the way I always looked at it.
I'm glad you talk about that, because I think there is this idea that seems to be more prevalent than it has in the past, which is, and I think this is perpetuated by social media, that if somebody doesn't get it, that's their fault. That's their problem. Like, they don't understand, they're dumb, they don't get it. And I think, I mean, you can take that attitude, sure, but with me, I'm a professional communicator. That's what I do for a living. So if I want to communicate a message and I want somebody to understand something, the onus is on me to make sure that I do it in a way that the person listening can receive it in a meaningful and significant way, and then act on the information so it serves them in some positive way.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%, Ryan. I think that if you really understand something, you should be able to communicate it to anybody.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I like how you broke down in the book. You talk about the 10 different lessons that you've learned, and you've alluded to one quite often. And the one that really stood out to me, and you already alluded to this, is, and I wrote it down here, no one leaves the pool until everyone passes the test. Can you explain that to me?
Yeah, that was one of my first lessons at NASA. And it was we were going to have to take a swim test. And I found out about this after I was selected. You know, I was selected as an astronaut in my fourth try, and I was very excited. You get a phone call giving you that good news, and then you receive an information packet with welcoming you to the astronaut office and basic stuff about moving to Houston when you show up for work, blah, blah, blah.
Sure.
So I opened this thing up, and I'm very excited. And you know, first paragraph was, you know, congratulations or something like that. And then second paragraph was, please practice your swimming because you're going to have to take a swim test in order to go through water survival, through the Navy water survival course down in Pensacola. And the reason for that is that we're going to be flying in ejection seat aircraft. And if we eject out of the airplane over water, we come down in a parachute. You got to learn, you know, how to do that. You got to be able to eject and work the parachute and go into the water and then survive in the water until someone comes get you. Right. So you don't want to drown after all that. Right. And the same for the space shuttle. We had a bailout mode where if you if you launched and you had a problem and you couldn't make it to orbit and you were coming back down, you could try to turn back toward the United States and land somewhere there, or you could keep going over the ocean and try to land in, we had a couple sites in Southern Europe or Northern Africa. But if you were stuck in between in what we called the Black Stripe region, you were going in the water. You were going in the ocean. Man. So we would bail out. Yeah, that was, we luckily never had to do that. Although we did have 2 accidents where that would have been a better option. But what wasn't feasible. But for those cases where we lost the 2 space shuttles. But the thing was, you bail out of that thing, you're going to end up finding yourself in the water. You want to be able to survive that. So to survive the experience in the water until help comes and gets you. So that was why we needed to go through water survival training. And in order to go to water survival training, you had to be able to pass a basic swim test so you don't drown during the water survival training. So I guess they had experiences where people showed up from NASA, and the Navy was like, these people, they don't have the basic skills. They can't take the course. So they warned us we were going to have to pass the test before we could go do that. And I was a little concerned, but I practiced. I was not a strong swimmer. I mainly avoided the waters as I was growing up, but I needed to learn how to swim well, and I practiced. And by but I still was worried about how I was going to do. Even if I could get by the test,
Of
which I thought
course.
I could do. I mean, I don't like this. Again, I was this academic type, and you had all these cool military people and pilots and everything. And here, who's the dork is what I was afraid of. So I was trying to, try to hide that as long as I could. Anyway, after our first week was mainly administrative stuff, and at the end of that week on that Friday, and we were just mainly getting lectures, people telling us about stuff. This is the health plan, this is how you do this, whatever. And then at the end of that week, Jeff Ashby, who was a Navy pilot, astronaut in that class before us, was proven himself a good leader, and he was given the assignment of leading us through our training, being like our adult supervision, telling us what we needed to know. And so he goes to the front of the room, and he says, "All right, end of the first week, I want to remind everyone that the second week our training starts in earnest, and we're going to begin on Monday with the swim test." I was like, "Come on. How about a math
Let's get
quiz?"
this out of the way. You're right. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, oh man,
Something more your
geez,
speed.
this is terrible. Yeah, about a physics quiz. How about we do that? Something. And then he goes on to say, "Okay, who are the strong swimmers in this class?" So we had a couple Navy qualified divers and some other people that raised their hands, and then he said, more important, who are the weak swimmers, and don't lie to me. So I raised my hand, as did a few other people, and then he said, "All right, everybody who didn't raise their hand could leave, but go home for the weekend. But the people who raised their hands, the strong swimmers and the weak swimmers, are going to stay after class, and you're going to find a time to get together over the weekend at a pool. And the strong swimmers are going to help the weak swimmers with their swimming, because when we go to the pool on Monday, no one leaves the pool until everyone passes the test." And so
Wow.
that made me realize I'm in a different world here now. Individual accomplishment is okay, but to be successful at NASA, and I think to be successful at life and in just about everything, it's a team game. You've got to look at the success of the team. That the individual accolades are great, but how is my teammate doing? How are we doing to achieve what we need to all accomplish? And so you could have been Michael Phelps and set a world record in that pool, whatever that means, doing this stuff. But if you left a teammate behind, then you also failed. And then the other side of it was, I don't want to be the one holding back the team, which was,
Yeah, of
I think,
course.
almost as important as a lesson. If you're hurt, if you can't perform or whatever it is that you can't do, you need to admit that, because you don't want to hurt the team. If you're injured, or if whatever's going on in your mind, as I was saying, you need to be able to admit that. So that was a lesson I learned. And so I admitted I needed help, and I got help over the weekend. It actually became fun. It was never like in anything we were doing, if someone needed help, you looked at it as an opportunity to be helpful, because it'd be paid back 10 times over when you needed that help. And that was important for the team to be successful. So it wasn't like the strong were burdened by the weak. It was like, it was part of their job. And that the only way you got yourself in trouble is if you didn't help when you could, or if you needed help and you didn't admit it, because both of those
Mm.
things will hurt the team. And so that to me was a very good lesson to learn right off the bat of where I was in a lot of different ways. Is you need to help, you need to think about the team. It's nothing wrong with not being able to do something, as long as you get that help and make sure you're up to standard so you can do your job and help make the team successful. Admitting mistakes is okay. Admitting that you need help is okay. No one's going to ever hold that against you. You try to hide stuff, that's when you get into trouble. If you're hiding something and then you get found out, that could be a problem. So you always want to
Right.
come forward with making a mistake, doing something wrong, whatever it is. Let people know, hey, I did this. This is what we can learn from it. But you try to hide up a mistake, particularly when it could affect someone else, and then that's not good. Then you can't be trusted.
It almost seems a little counterintuitive, based on, maybe this is just based on the movies, right? Where I would assume, without hearing
Mm-hmm.
that story, that in the second week, when the training really begins, it
Mm-hmm.
almost becomes a weeding out process. Like, let's see who doesn't have it, because we need to get them out of here as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
But it doesn't sound like that's the
No.
case at all.
No, it wasn't. But at that point, you're all selected as astronauts, and you realize that you're only going to be successful if you help each other. No one can go into space by themselves.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that any one thing we did was that difficult. It's just that there was so much of it, and not any one person could do it. So you needed to work as a team and work together to accomplish the task. You wanted people looking over your shoulder. You wanted to look over their shoulder. You didn't want people to feel like you were being critical by doing that. That was something that that's the way we operated. So, it was not, it wasn't, I'm going to get there before you. And when that did ever surface, that was unsatisfactory. And so
I'm
if someone
sure.
was perceived as a me person, that person would quickly need to straighten themselves out. And if they didn't, then there would be a problem. So it wasn't so much that if you couldn't do the job, but if you presented yourself as someone who was out for themselves, that was a problem, because that could lead to trouble on a mission.
When you're selected for the program, are you officially an astronaut at that point, or does that come later?
Well, it kind of comes later, Ryan. But they call us. You're actually, when you apply to become an astronaut, we're talking about the NASA program now, right?
Right. Sure.
It's you apply to the astronaut candidate program.
Candidate.
So you're
Okay.
applying to be an astronaut, or as you're affectionately called, an ascan. So
Ascan, I like
we
that.
were all ascans, astronaut candidates. So you're an astronaut candidate when you're hired. So they more or less have 2 years to get rid of you without anybody, without any real repercussions there. If something's not going well, whatever that means, you can get out of there. They can get rid of you.
Sure.
That rarely happens, but most people complete their training and get the opportunity to graduate. We actually have a little graduation, and you get your silver astronaut pin at graduation. And then when you fly in space, you get a gold astronaut pin. Of course, you pay for all this stuff. It's a government program, so the individual pays for it.
Stuff, yeah, sure.
Buy your own stuff, man. We paid for our own coffee, even water. If you wanted filtered water, you had to pay for that too. It was like
Is that right?
They would collect. Yeah, it was. We're not gonna. You can't put that bill to the taxpayer, man. You got to buy your own coffee. So,
well, look, as a taxpayer, I appreciate that. So thank you very much.
There you go. That's it, man. You got to keep it above board here. So, yeah, you're an ascan when you first arrive, and
okay, got it.
Treated as such. Yeah,
I'm sure.
Yeah, you were responsible for like running the parties and entertainment at the Christmas party, all that stuff. Ascans did all that stuff. We need some Ascans around here to arrange this. We want to have a party. Where are they?
Yeah. I don't know if we can say that anymore. I don't know. They probably don't even say it at NASA anymore. It's politically incorrect. I'm sure that
Ascan or party. What's that?
Well, yeah, I'm sure there's plenty of parties. I'm sure. I just don't know about the Ascan thing.
Yeah, I don't think that's changed anytime soon.
Were there very many candidates, Ascans, that scrubbed out themselves, that decided, hey, you know what, this isn't what I thought it would be? I mean, it sounds like at that point you've got so much vested in it. I'm sure you grew up as a young boy wanting to do this. I can't imagine somebody saying, I made the program, but I think I'm good, I'm out.
Yeah. Well, all of us, we had 44 of us, 35 Americans and 9 international astronauts. All of us successfully completed the ASCAN year and a half, 2 years, or wherever it was. So we all graduated. But then time went by, and we had a couple things that delayed things. We were building a space station, and a lot of the flights were to build the space station with the shuttle. And that was delayed because the service module, which was needed to have people on board and continue the build after the first element launched, was delayed. The Russians were building that, and it was delayed a couple of years, so it backed up the flights, and people had to wait in line to get assigned. And then I got to fly, and then there was an accident, which again we had the Space Shuttle Columbia accident. So there's some waiting around going on there, and we had, out of the 44 of us, all but 4 people flew in space, and 3 were because of medical reasons, and the fourth was kind of just lost interest. I think that person got involved in doing other projects and didn't, went on a rotation somewhere at NASA. I think just they still with the government now even, but never got a chance to fly because they got distracted to do other things, which hopefully was the right thing. So that's either it's a medical thing or you choose to do something else. Rarely is it that someone gets bounced.
Is it so? It sounds like you're on a rotation. You're waiting in line. Is there a way to skip the line? Is it performance based? Is it based on certain criteria, or
Mhm.
based on what the mission might be and your aptitude for your ability to complete that mission, where you might bump ahead of somebody else?
Yeah, it's not like it's like everyone's in a pool, right? Everyone's in the pool of candidates. Once you get through the ascan training, and then so like the first guy in our class, one of the first pilots that flew in our class was Scott Kelly, and he was he the guy you had on your podcast by some chance? He does a lot of
No,
outreach stuff.
no, he
Was it
wasn't.
who
But
was it that you had him? Do you remember who it was?
I feel really bad because I can't remember right offhand.
That's
I
all right.
actually I actually think that he had just been selected.
Oh,
I'm not even sure that he was officially an astronaut at that point. I think he was at
uh,
the that ASCAN
okay, yeah,
point
all right.
stage.
Well, Scott's a good guy,
I know of
and he
Scott.
was what's that?
I
He
said
almost spent a year in
I know
space.
of Scott. Yeah.
Yeah, he almost
So
spent a year in space. He's got a twin brother who's also an astronaut, Mark. Good guys. So I remember like when they were looking, what they wanted to do is they had a flight. Again, these flights were backed up. So we had been astronauts for about almost 3 years, and we hadn't had maybe we had one of our international astronauts fly, but they were kind of on a different program because their countries had arrangements for them to fly. But out
mm,
of the Americans, no one was flown in space yet. But there was a flight coming up to the Hubble Space Telescope, the one before I got to go on, like the third in the series of five to service the telescope, was kind of a
okay.
last minute thing that came up. There was some problems with the telescope. It could not do its job any longer. They needed to get up there as quickly as possible. So they kind of they added an extra flight to go do this, and wanted the guys to get up there quickly. And they wanted to get someone from my class just for morale purposes, get them assigned. And so the question was, who can we fly out of these pilots? And the answer came back from the training team. Well, it's a short amount of time, so you need someone who's already had rendezvous training, a pilot that has
Mm,
completed that. And so Scott had that. He had, I think he might have been the only guy out of the pilots that had completed the rendezvous course, because that in itself takes a couple months. So they were on that's an example of that would happen for me.
you're docking with the space station. Is that what
Yeah,
that
well, in that
is?
case, they were flying a Hubble, and so it's learning
Got
how to
it.
fly a spaceship, to do this run, fly two spaceships in formation, more or less, and how to, because the orbital mechanics are kind of tricky. You actually, if you speed up, you'll go to a higher orbit. Like if you're
Mm,
following something and you speed up too much, you'll increase your energy, go to a higher orbit, and actually slow down, because the higher orbits, this lower orbit's going faster. It's really wacky. And
mm,
so you got to be careful. You don't want to get too far behind. So there's a way you approach a certain way and kind of get behind it. You approach through through the gravity vector, or the vector to the earth, the R vector we called it. And you would
okay.
come up there, and then kind of you'd have to work the transition to get in behind it, and follow it using a velocity vector. So it was a little bit tricky, and there was a lot of emergency situations, failures, and everything else you had to learn to deal with, and tools you would use to help your radar and lasers and all kinds of stuff. So it was pretty intense, and would take a couple months. So that's how they made that. This guy has rendezvous training. He's a good guy. Let's grab him to be the pilot for this flight. In my case, that following Hubble flight, they had always had experienced people spacewalk on Hubble. The very first servicing mission, there was 4 spacewalkers on each flight, and each one of those, on the first mission, each one of the spacewalkers had flown and done a spacewalk. On
Mm,
the next mission, they had all the spacewalkers. Two of the guys were experienced spacewalkers, but the other 2 guys who never spacewalked before had flown before, and that's the way it
okay.
was for the next 2 missions. And then for that mission that I was assigned to, they were trying to again give opportunities to new people, and they felt they were confident enough in what they knew about the telescope at this point. So what they did is they assigned 2 people who had spacewalking experience, one person who was a person who had flown before but not spacewalked, and then one total rookie. And I ended up being that one rookie. So no, I was available. A couple of my classmates had already been assigned to other flights, so I wasn't the first one assigned to a flight, but I was still available, and they felt I was the right guy to be a spacewalker on Hubble, and I got the job. So it's kind of looking around who's available and who fits. And it really, I think they try to make the decision as best they can, who is the right person for the job. And
Sure.
that can mean a lot of different things, but they'll try to, they'll try to give new people opportunities. My friend Greg Johnson, who I flew with on my second flight, was a Navy pilot, and he had this saying that you want to hand out assignments to the junior most qualified person. You want to give the
Mm.
new people a chance. You want to give it to a junior person when you can, but you want that person to be most qualified, the most qualified person to do that
What's
out of the
the
group
what's
that's
the
available.
purpose of the giving it to the junior most person, as long as they have the criteria of being qualified? What's
They
the
don't need to
purpose
be
of that?
junior most. You just try to give the new people a chance, is what it
Got it.
is.
Okay.
You always trying to give the new people a chance. You don't want to save all the goodies for the people. It's not good form. People will see that, if the experienced guys are getting all the good assignments and the new people aren't getting a chance, and there's really no good reason for that. That's not good for morale, and it doesn't help the future of the program. And you always
Yeah,
want, I
nobody
think,
wants
try to
to
give the new people
nobody
a
wants
chance.
to stick around, I'm sure, at
Yeah,
that
I
point.
mean, come on, and it's like it's not fair. It's kind of being greedy, and so that was not looked upon as being something that you'd want to do. Is be greedy about flight assignments. You want to try to bring the new people along and give them opportunities, but you can't do that. At my second flight, we ended up flying 4 rookies on that flight. But the way to counterbalance that is that we had 3 people, including me, who had flown to Hubble before. So
Okay, sure.
you could fly 4 people on 4 new people on a flight if you have 3 other people who are not just familiar with flying in space, but also familiar with the telescope. So that was, you try to mix and match and get the right grouping of people. And a lot of thought goes into it. I used to think, oh, it's just, by chance or whatever, but they really did try to put together the right team based on experience and skill level to you have to get the job done. So if you don't have anyone available who's a newer person that can fill the, giving one of my bosses explained it, that they were signing a flight and they wanted to give people, they needed people who were competent and who had the right experience, and they also want to give new people a chance. But the experience chip outweighed the flying the new person, and they gave it to an experienced person. So, and he came right out and told us this is why we made this decision. We went with this person who's experienced, and that happens too. A lot of times you need that experience, but when you can, you want to assign the new people to do something when possible.
What was it like that when you went on that first spacewalk? I don't know the mechanics of it. It's, obviously you put your suit on and you're
Mhm.
attached and you've got your hoses and harnesses and cables and whatever else.
Mhm.
And then, I'm sure some door opens and there you are and you're out there and you're like, I've been in situations, not nearly what we're talking about here, where it almost feels like this defies physics and it's just
Mhm.
really unsettling. What was it like for you?
Yeah. Um, we were really well trained, Ryan, and I'm sure that if you're in the military, the experiences you had, no one was trying to kill me.
Yeah.
Occasionally it happened, but that was an accident when that happened. They felt bad about it. But it was a bit overwhelming from the thought of doing it was more overwhelming than actually doing it. We were
Mm,
so well trained, it was unbelievable. When I first poked my head out of the airlock, the door does open, as you mentioned, and there's space. It's the door to space, and you leave it. You go out of the airlock, and I poked my head out first to kind of go out on my back, looking up head up out of the airlock, and my spacewalking buddy Jim Newman was already out, and he was up on a handrail up on the bulkhead looking down at me, and he looks down there and with his big smile on his, I could see it. It was day past, so the sun was out, but he had his visor up looking down at me with his big smile on his face, and above his head was Africa. So it is, and I thought to myself, how in the world am I going to get anything done around here? This is just a beautiful view. But then I
yeah,
turned my head and looked, and there were handrails on the bulkhead of the space shuttle for us to move around on, just like there were in the training pool. And I remember
sure.
looking at that and said to myself, I'm all right. I know what I'm doing here. This looks familiar. And I felt that way through the whole spacewalk. Nothing prepares you for looking at the planet, and that experience being out there is pretty insane.
I
But
can't imagine.
to do your job, we were really well prepared, and I think it's okay to be nervous about things. It shows that you care. I think, people sometimes, oh, I'm nervous. That's all right. It shows you, if you didn't give a crap about what you were doing, you wouldn't get nervous, right? If something's meaningful to you, you typically will get nervous. And then that's all right. And it helps you prepare. But you reach a point where it's time to execute, and you have to put all that behind you. You have to trust in your training and your team and your tools and yourself, and say, now it's time to relax, and we're ready to go here, and we're going to execute the plan. And try not to worry, or being scared doesn't help you in those situations. I think you just have to focus on what you're doing, rely on your training, and that's what I did, and was able to get through it that way.
The real question is, having seen it from your vantage point, is the Earth flat? That's the real question we need to have answered here today.
Yeah. All right, Ryan, can you answer that? No, it's not flat. Cross that off your list of worries.
All right.
You have so many other things to be worried about. Don't worry about
that. One of the lessons that you had just alluded to is just making adjustments. You've got your training. Obviously you said you're well trained, but still you see Africa, you see the planet the way it is. Yeah. And then you have to pivot and you have to make adjustments. And that's one of the chapters in the book, is knowing when to pivot. How do you know when to do that? I'm sure that with all the protocols that an organization like NASA has in place, like we talked about earlier, there's probably a lot of rules, but I imagine there's times where rules need to be bent and broken based on situations. How do you know when to do that?
Yeah, I think sometimes what I found was that the decisions are made for you. Like, we are retiring this spaceship and bringing in another one. That's what happened with the space shuttle. And there were guys in the office that were like, we need to keep the space shuttle. And, we had this meeting. The NASA administrator came down to talk to us, and they were saying, but why are we giving up the space shuttle? And he's like, well, the space shuttle's going away, and your government has made that decision, so you can't fly it anymore. It's not going to be available to you, and
right.
You have to adjust to this new world of working with SpaceX. And we were at the time working with the Russians more closely as our only ride to space for a while. And we're like, we shouldn't be doing that. Well, it doesn't matter, because that's what's happening. So sometimes the change is, it's there. The technology is there. The internet is part of our life. We have to use cell phones. Maybe you don't have to, but there's things that life changes, and you need to accept these things. Or you're going to get left behind. You're not going to be able to continue. You're not going to be able to communicate or be successful, I think. But the other, I think the harder question is or the harder thing to do is know when it's time for you to make the choice to do something differently. And that's what I was faced with. And you asked me how. I think you got to listen to yourself and listen to your heart and your soul and what you're telling yourself. When I decided to become not that I was going to decide to become, but I would decide that I would try to become an astronaut, that I wanted to be part of the space program. I wanted to try to do that, because I didn't know if it was going to work out, but I knew I wanted to try. I was listening to what my heart was saying was important to me. I just found myself always interested in it. Since I was a little kid watching Neil Armstrong on the moon, I was always interested. I never believed I could be a part of it. I thought, there's no way I'm going to be able to do this. But and I never really thought about it seriously until after I was graduating college. But it was obvious to me that the space program was really important to me. I would walk by a newsstand and I would see a space article or something on a magazine. I would stop and read it. If I was the TV flipping channels and it was a space something on, I would watch it. I was interested. To me, there was something inside of me that told me that this was different than anything else that was going on to me. It was really important to me. And either I could just keep watching it, or I could try to be a part of it. And I knew I would only be happy with myself if I tried to be a part of it. I could understand if I wasn't able to, because I was not accepted as an astronaut or couldn't get a job in the space program. Those things happen. That's life. But at least it wasn't going to be because I wasn't trying. And I think when it came time for me to leave, it was the same thing I felt after it actually happened to me on orbit on my second flight, some of the last days on orbit. We had some time off, and I was looking out the window, listening to music, watching the Earth, and I felt satisfied with what I was doing. It was really strange, right? I never felt, I felt satisfaction after that second flight. And when I came back to Earth, it was, I started seeing signs in myself that I wasn't as interested as I was before,
really?
Years ago. Like when I was I mean, to become an astronaut and to go on these space flights, that I would have done I wouldn't have done anything. I wouldn't have done anything, illegal or immoral or really stupid. I try to avoid doing that. But I felt like I would eat dirt. Someone said, "Hey, you want to fly to space? You got to eat that dirt." I would like verify. You sure? Like, yeah,
Done.
I'd eat it. I mean, I would have done anything. I was okay to sacrifice, take the risk. Sacrifice time with the family, which was unfortunate, but had to happen sometimes. And I was okay with all that. I was like, that's all right. This is what I'm willing to do. And I felt after my second flight, I just wasn't the same. Like I wasn't that interested in doing the extra training anymore. I wasn't that interested in the overnight shift at the Space Center. There were other things that aspects of the job and what was going on with my family that all of a sudden seemed more important. I still did my job, but I didn't have that real fire. And I think to do something like dedicate yourself to a space flight, you need to be 100% in, and so does everybody else in your life. I just didn't feel that burning desire. And I think I kind of suspected and was kind of going through the motions for a while that, oh yeah, I'll go to space again. But and if it was easy, I probably would have went. If I would have gotten assigned to one of the final shuttle flights, I would have gone, I think, because I knew how to do that. I was fully trained for that sort of flight. It would have been, I don't know, I want to say easy, but I think I could handle that. But what happened was I wasn't offered one of those flights. I was offered a flight to go to the space station on a Soyuz, a Russian rocket. And the training was going to take about 3 years, and most of it was going to be out of the country. And my kids were both in high school. And when I weighed all of it, I was like, I think I want to maybe do something else. And so I turned down that flight assignment. And when I turned that, mainly I put it on my personal reasons. Or, I don't want to, I can't, it's not a good idea for me to be away from home at this time for that long, for these years, maybe in a few years or something. And my boss was pretty cool about it. Peggy Whitson was like, okay, fine. I'm disappointed, but I understand, and we'll keep you in mind for the future or something like that. But
Sure, right.
Once you turn down a flight assignment, I think you're really telling yourself something. And I was like, that's it. What am I doing? What am I telling myself? And I knew it was time to start thinking about something else, and that was okay. I think I'll always consider myself an astronaut. I think that's what will define me, I think, in my mind anyway. People might think of other things, whatever that might be. My role on the Big Bang Theory. If you've seen the show, The Big Bang Theory, I've on that show 7 times, and people know me from that. Even people at NASA know more about me being on that show than me what I did in space. So, but in my brain, I'm not an actor. In my brain, I'm that 35-year-old astronaut. That's how I think of myself, and I think that's okay. But I think it's also important to find in that move to the next thing, not to give up a dream, to find another dream. And for me, what I enjoyed is doing things like we're doing right now, Ryan, telling the stories of space and sharing these incredible lessons that I learned and trying to be helpful to other people. I'm a professor at Columbia. I was an instructor before. I was at Georgia Tech as a professor there for a short time, less than a year. It was really like 9 months, and I found that I was selected by NASA, and so that kind of that started to slow down. So I was there less than a year in Atlanta teaching there, but I had done that, and I always had that in the back of my mind while I was at NASA, that at least I had something else I could go to if the NASA thing ever, kind of wound down for me. And so I looked at academic jobs, and I was offered a job at Columbia. I got a chance to come back to the New York area. I live in New York City now, and do some work at the Intrepid Museum, write books, and do other things that I really enjoy. Give talks about what I learned as an astronaut and how it could help people. So I was overjoyed to find out that the lessons I had learned would be useful to people. And the only way to really share those is to get out of the astronaut office, believe it or not. I mean, because your job is flying in space, and you really can't write a book.
You don't have time.
You're not allowed to. It's against the ethics rules. You're not allowed to profit from while you're an astronaut. So,
although you are tweeting from space, though, I do know that about you.
Yeah. All right. So I did tweet from space, but this is interesting, Ryan, to give you an example. If you remember, like about a couple of years ago, NFTs were a big deal.
Yeah, sure.
You remember that?
Of course.
Just a little off topic here, but NFTs are big. And some guy, I think the first guy that sent the first tweet, whoever that guy was that invented Twitter, He sent the first tweet, and they minted it as an NFT, and it sold for like a lot of money. Do you remember this at all?
Yeah, I do.
Remember that? All right. So one of my agents had this idea. You sent that first tweet from space, and it's on your account. You get to keep your account. Why don't we mint that and sell that? You get a lot of money for the first tweet from space. And I was like, okay, let me check with my old boss. So I go over to NASA because I do not want to get crosswise with the federal government.
Of course.
So I reached out to the lawyers there, and they said, you created that tweet while you were,
On the job.
while you were a NASA astronaut in space on a U.S. government spacecraft. That is considered to be a work of the United States government and cannot be copyrighted. And for anyone to claim it, as as a copyright, or that they could mint it as an NFT, would be unethical at best and a felony at worst. So it's like, okay,
wow. You're like, okay,
that's it. I don't need to mint
Just
that.
wanted to check.
So, no, man. So that was part of my job, Ryan, was sending that first tweet from space. So yeah,
that's pretty interesting. I did years ago, probably 3 or 4 years ago. I saw the space shuttle. I don't know which shuttle it was. I believe it was at the Smithsonian in DC, and
that's Discovery.
Space
Shuttle Discovery is there. Yeah,
that is amazing. I mean,
it is.
I was just taken back. I was so blown away. I mean, we all see the shuttle on TV or his picture on the internet, but then you stand. I mean, it's massive. It's way bigger than I thought it was. Yeah, and it's just this incredible piece of technology and machinery, and the fact that it travels to space. I was just so taken back by it. It was amazing.
No, it is truly amazing, Ryan. There's no doubt about it. Every time we have one here in New York at the Intrepid Museum, it's a Space Shuttle Enterprise that was used for drop tests. Never went to space, but it's the same size as the other space shuttles. As Discovery is in Washington, as you mentioned. Endeavor's in L.A. and Atlantis, one of the ones I flew on, is in Florida.
Okay,
so they are huge. They're incredible.
They're unbelievable.
They're really incredible. You compare that to what we get back now from the Soyuz or the Dragon the SpaceX. They come back, they bop up and down like a cork. These little things.
Right.
It's a little room. It's like they're flying in a closet. It's they have at the Intrepid Museum, we have a Soyuz that's flown in space right next to the space shuttle. It's out the back behind the space shuttle on the floor. It looks like a poop that came out of the butt of the space shuttle. It's so little. It's like a little. It's like the baby compared to this gigantic thing. And that's when people have that same reaction when they see it for the first time. Like, holy crap, it's really big. It took off. It took off like a rocket. Okay, with 7 people on board. That's relatively a lot of people. We don't have anything that flies that many people right now. And a bunch of stuff.
Yeah, a lot of equipment.
Of the space station. A lot of equipment. The Hubble Space Telescope is the size of a school bus. It's big. You take a lot of. You can't fit that stuff in these little baby things. They got to send up the gear separate, and so you can take up a lot of cargo and 7 people and launch it off the planet. Right. Then it can go to orbit and become like a mini space station. You live in there. It opens up the doors so you can radiate heat, and you can do your job, and you can stay there for like I did, about 14 days. And then you close this thing back up, and it lands on a runway like an aircraft. It's a glider. There's no power when it comes down. It just glides down at the end.
Oh, okay.
But this is unbelievable, and it lands on a runway. And we're able to create this thing back in the 70s. And just an amazing spaceship. We'll never have anything as cool for a very long time. The ones we have now I think are better because they're a lot safer, and they're reusable, and they're much less expensive than operating the shuttle. So they're good for those reasons. But the cool factor, I think I'd go with the space shuttle.
I agree. I remember as I was standing under it, looking at this massive, aircraft. And I had read The Wright Brothers by David McCullough years earlier.
Yeah.
And I couldn't help but think if those two were standing exactly where I was standing, what they must have been thinking based on, coming from a bicycle shop to gliding 3 feet off the ground for 50 meters or whatever the first flight was, and how far it's come in a relatively short period of time.
Yeah, it was a little over 100 years. They did that when they did it in 1903, I think they did
1903, I think is, yep, exactly.
But that wasn't much of an aircraft. It was like a kite, they're flying around, those guys, with the goggles or whatever they were doing. Yeah, it was a little sporty. Yeah.
Yeah,
come
interesting.
a long way. Yeah, and to the moon in 1969, amazing.
Yeah. Wild. What do you think of the I want to be respectful of your time, but I do have a question about the future of space travel. We have obviously advanced technology, admittedly, without trying to be offensive to you or anybody else who is an astronaut. There's a lot of human error, of course, that needs to be taken into consideration. Now we have AI. Do you feel like more space travel will be done without the use of astronauts and more based on technology? Like, what does that look like, do you think?
I think it's I think there's still a role for the astronaut. I think that technology really helps. We can reuse the rocket ships in a way that we couldn't before. They're able to fly the booster back instead of with the shuttle. We recovered the solid rockets, but the external tank got thrown away.
Just dumped, right?
Piece of equipment. What's that?
I said they were just dumped, right?
Dumped. Well, yeah. Well, back in the Apollo days, just everything was dumped except for the command module came back. That gigantic, colossal rocket. Only a little bitty thing came back from it where the crew is in. So now everything gets reused, and with the shuttle, we reused most of it, but now just about everything can come back and very efficiently to be used again, refueled and do it over. And so that's an advantage. It brings the cost down. So the technology can bring the cost down because you can reuse things and do things more efficiently. Also, the private companies are a little bit more efficient than the government. We talked about government bureaucracy. And NASA and the government is, you're dealing with the taxpayers' dollars, so you can't do everything with it. You got to be careful what you're doing. They also have become, I think, a bit risk averse because they've had some accidents. This is the government I'm talking about, but I think private enterprise, they don't want to take risks with people's lives, but they're a little bit quicker in their development. They can make decisions much more quickly than the government can. And maybe that's what you were referring to earlier about the government bureaucracy. I think private enterprise has that advantage. So I think having them involved has meant a lot. It's been a big difference that we've been able to do things more efficiently at a lower cost. My Columbia students, my students that I teach, have been able to fly 2 experiments in space in the last couple of years. That'd be unheard of, even like 5 or 10 years ago, but now it's possible. So it's opened up a lot of opportunities. And with you mentioned the AI and the automation, it's reduced the amount of training necessary. It was ridiculous how much training, especially our pilots, to fly the shuttle. I asked a guy on my first flight, Dwayne Carey Digger was an Air Force guy, and I asked him, how much of your training did you not use in space? Because we had to know everything. When it came to the thing about spacewalks, we generally practiced what we were going to do, and then we also added how we would solve problems. But you had to handle every emergency on the space shuttle or in the robot arm or everywhere else. So most of your training was for these things that were never going to happen. And he said to me that 99.99% of his training he never used in space. But now, since the computer can handle a lot of this stuff, you can train to do other things that you're actually going to be doing in space instead of worrying about all these contingencies. So it's brought down the training effort for working the spaceship. Now you can concentrate on other things. And it's made it so more people can go. We have Captain Kirk flying to space. So got that going on. So, and I think that's a good thing. So it allows more people to go with less training, allows people to do more things. It's I think been a big advantage getting these commercial companies involved, and that's what I expect will continue to happen in the future. And I think there'll always be, you mentioned about the role for people. I think there's always going to be a role for people. People can still do things that robots can't do, automation can't do. We can make decisions and improvise and do things that might not be in the computer program. They that can't match us. Now, even if there is a time where some kind of robot from Star Wars or something can, those drones or whatever they are, the clones or whatever they around, those little guys with the weapons or whatever it is, if those guys, that maybe for the battlefield, that's a good idea. But even if they could explore and pick, I still think we're going to want people involved because we're human and we can't deny that. And Yeah, you know who really landed first on the moon? We know about Neil Armstrong and the Americans, but I didn't know this when I was an astronaut and when I became an astronaut, but I found out that the Russians, the Soviet Union landed a spacecraft on the moon before the Americans did. Did you know
Oh,
that?
really? No, I didn't know
I
that.
didn't know that till I became it. I'm like, what?
I
You
didn't
know
want
why
to
we
know
don't
that.
know that? No one can. That's why, because it wasn't a person. It was just a piece of machinery. Hey,
That's
they've
right.
got a machine up there. Like, okay, we're going for the person. And that everyone remembers Neil Armstrong taking it for
Of
whoever's. I mean, I
course.
remember. You've heard of it, right?
Sure.
But no one knows what. No one cared because it wasn't a. I think for us to pay attention and to really feel like we've done something when we want people involved. And the guys who went to the moon, 4 of them are still alive. I just hung out with one of them, Charlie Duke, last week. Very cool guy. He was on Apollo 16, so he was like the
Mm.
11th, the 10th guy to walk on the moon out of the 12. Anyway, he's still the youngest guy to walk on the moon, and he's 88 years old. We haven't sent him. He was the youngest out of the 12, and he's still alive. Anyway, no one else has been there yet since him, since Apollo 17. Anyway, I was talking to him about it, and I've heard the other guys say the same thing. That when they landed on the moon successfully, the world didn't see it as an American accomplishment. They saw it as a world accomplishment. The entire world paid attention. Every
Hmm.
newspaper, including the Soviet Union, had it on the front page and covered it live. Every place around the world, from ally to foe, had that thing going everywhere because it was that important. And when they traveled after their flights, the moon guys, when they would go to India or wherever they were, it wouldn't be the Americans did it. It was we did it. We saw it as a human accomplishment. And I think there's something about that that we can't deny, that we like to participate in things. And so even you send your machine there to see what's there and do stuff. But what we're going to get inspired by and what we're going to want to do and be interested in is having people participate. And it can't be all of us, but at least sending a representative to do stuff. I think that's what makes life interesting.
Well, I'm excited about whether it's colonizing Mars or finding new discoveries. I'm excited to see what happens. I know there's so much
Me
more to
too.
be explored and so much more to learn.
Yeah.
Obviously, we only got into 2 or 3 of the 10 hard learned lessons.
Yeah.
But the book is Moonshot. There's a lot
Thanks,
more
man.
lessons in there. If you would let the guys know where to connect with you,
Yeah.
where to pick up a copy of the book and learn more
Bet.
about what you're doing and hear more of your stories.
Yeah. So I've got a website, MikeMassimino.com. You can contact me through that website. It also has information about the book and other stuff that I've done are there. So you can explore there if you'd like. I'm also on Twitter. It's the first guy to tweet from space. We talked about that. Astro_Mike on Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook. Well, I got all that going. And if you're interested in getting the book, I mean, the most important thing to me is that maybe this conversation, Ryan, was helpful for some. And if they want more, hopefully they can get it in the book. And that Moonshot is available wherever you want to buy a book. If you like doing it, around the corner at the bookstore, the local bookseller, that's nice. If you do it through Amazon, it's there. Barnes and Noble, whatever, however you buy a book, it's there. It's not in the libraries yet, I don't think, but eventually it'll be there too. You can check it out in the library. But if you're interested in getting wherever books are sold, you'll be able to find Moonshot.
Well, we'll sync everything up. I appreciate you. I appreciate your service to this country. Obviously, your desire to follow your dreams. It's very inspiring to me, and I really appreciate your time today. Thanks for joining us.
Ryan, I enjoyed the conversation. Thank you for your service and for doing such a great podcast too. I think that hopefully, your other episodes have been helpful to a lot of people and inspirational. And I hope this one is as well. Thanks for having me.
This definitely will. It definitely will.